This is not a soft snow story, not a hearth-sung hymn. This is a knife song, a corn song, a crow-black rhyme, a ledger in straw, a verdict in burlap, a tax of the earth. If you came for comfort, turn back before the pumpkins blink. The village is called Candlefield only when someone must call it something. A bowl of black soil cupped in a fist of low hills. Barns tilt like bad teeth. Fences rot like gossip. The river lies with the ease of water finding the same lie twice. Every year when October bleeds out, the town lifts its lanterns, lays out loaves, and whispers the only true prayer it knows. Not me, not mine, not this time. On the far side of the last fence line stands the scarecrow. Not quaint, not comic, not kind. A spindled spine lashed to a stake, a burlap face slit in a crude grin, a priest's hat or a thief's, depending on who tells it, tilted to hear. It does not guard grain. It judges it, and on one night only, All Hallows, it lifts a straw nail arm, and a knife appears where no hand had hid it. Not rusted, not remembered, fresh, wet, waiting. Hush and hush, hold your hollow breath. At midnight it points, at midnight it punishes. They say the blade began with the first wrong harvest, when a farmer fattened his sacks by shaving his neighbor's field, when hunger sharpened into theft, when a body was found at the furrow's lip, the throat dark with clotted wine. They never buried the truth, so the field buried it for them, and the scarecrow took up the job of naming. Since then the pointing has found thieves, liars, oath-breakers, smug savers of bread. Once, remember this, once it pointed at no one yet, it pointed at tomorrow, and tomorrow, obedient as weather, did the rest. This year, the corn is more bone than bread. Husks rattle, stalks whisper, crows walk like undertakers rehearsing their condolences. Pumpkins grin until their faces slump into sores. Children smear their cheeks with chalk-white skulls to make the dead feel welcome. Men chew quiet. Women knot handkerchiefs to keep tongues from running. The chapel clock distrusts noon and believes only midnight. Mara stands near the fence with the scarf over her mouth, as if the cold can be kept from entering where it most wants. She is the miller's daughter. The wheel has not turned since spring. Debt grows in her house like mold. The roof owns more sky than shingle. She carries a length of cord in one pocket, a nail in the other, because every girl learns she must build or break her own shelter. The gathering has rules, none written, all obeyed. No cries when the arm lifts. No hands on the accused. No fire near the rose. No prayers out loud. Bring an offering the field can read. Bread, salt, haircut close. A ribbon from a boy who said he'd stay. Place it by the fence and step back before the wind changes its mind. Midnight crawls in on its knees. The lanterns blur like tired moons. The scarecrow moves. Not much. Enough. Burlap creases. Straw groans. The wrist of sticks remembers a human angle. A blade is there now. How, no one sees. Wet as a fresh lie. Slowly, surely, the arm lifts. The finger of nail extends, and the knife finds its aim the way a dowsing rod finds its river. It points at Mara, no gasp. The village learned to swallow, gasp whole. But eyes go loud. Mara lowers her scarf. Her mouth is the line a map forgets to draw. I've done nothing, thinks the thought that breaks like cheap glass. Her father shifts his weight, growing shorter inside his shadow. Last winter, the widow's son disappeared. He was seen with Mara at dusk. 2 shadows braided. Then he was only a rumor, then a prayer, then a problem the river refused to solve. A broken locket turned up near the mill, its chain snarled with grain. The miller, her father, came home with mud for thoughts, ale for breath, silence for supper. When Mara asked, his hand answered her cheek. You think this is a story of innocence betrayed? No, this is a harvest tale. It is about what feeds the field. Mara runs because legs are older than shame. Through stubble that cuts, through furrows that tug, past pumpkins carved with mouths too wide and teeth too many. They breathe candle and old sugar. They whisper her name like a verdict. Mara! 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 Crows lift like torn notes from a hymn written to scare. Her breath writes ghosts who refuse to leave. At the windbreak, trees that learn to hunch from men, she finds a knife half sunk like a confession. Not the scarecrow's. Another, older, known. Her father's, scar on the grip, nick on the edge. Black-brown stains map a past no rain erased. The handle fits her palm the way a story fits a mouth. Memory arrives with the cold. The widow's boy smiling with a loose coin grin. The debts, the shouting. The river shining like a way out. A necklace buried in grain. A question. The slap that answered. A lid hammered over everything till it hummed. The scarecrow did not choose her for what she had done. It chose her for what she would. Back through the rows she goes, the knife a metronome in her hand. The village waits like a held breath that has learned to enjoy the ache. Her father stands with the men, trying to be taller than his shadow. His eyes slide like spilled oil. His mouth chews a word not meant for speaking. He does not see her until she is close enough to cut his name from him. There are murders with thunder. This one is only weather. A short sound, a wet decision, a body deciding to become ground sooner. The men step back as if rain started. The women stare as if a sermon ended. The pastor fumbles for a verse and finds none that doesn't tremble. The sheriff counts to one and spends it. The bell forgets how to be useful. Mara lays the knife at the scarecrow's feet. Its straw hand opens. The fresh blade it held clatters into the furrow. Its arm falls with the finality of a gavel. Lanterns sway. Crows remark. The field drinks. The village lives. A murderer has been named. A murderer has been made. It keeps the boy who whistled while he stole. It keeps the wife who smiled while she salted. It keeps the baker who burned bread to starve a rival. It keeps the pastor who hid a letter in his sleeve. It keeps the father who taught his daughter to carry a nail. The field is not cruel. The field is exact. Winter arrives with its inventory of glass and bone. Mara works the mill alone. Grain arrives thin as excuses. She mends the wheel with cord and nail. It turns like a tired planet. Children dare each other to knock and run. The widow passes without looking. The sheriff looks without passing. At night, the river edits its story. The sky misplaces a star and pretends it meant to. The next harvest limps in, husks like paper ribs, pumpkins laughing through rot, men counting in their pockets, women counting in their heads. The scarecrow waits with that old wrong smile. Everyone pretends the wind is hard of hearing. Mara attends because not attending is a confession. She ties her hair with the cord that married the wheel to work. Her hands are the color of labor. Her breath spends nothing on prayer. If the scarecrow points again, she will follow its finger into the lesson. Midnight coughs itself whole. The arm lifts. The blade appears. The village tilts toward the pointing, as if gravity lives inside that glove of straw. It points at the pastor. No one moves, then everyone does. The pastor pales like a page dipped in milk. He mutters mercy while remembering the letter in his sleeve, the one that named a father, a debt, a drowning set to happen, the one he hid because some truths fetch a prize. Behind the church, a different kind of murder, or the same shaped new, occurs. The bell does not report it. The field does. And then, this the village will whisper for years. The scarecrow lifts its arm again. The knife swings like a weather vane. It points at the granary door. The lock protests and then cooperates. Inside, hoarded sacks, hidden tithes, the saved bread of greedy winter. Mara cuts the cords. Grain spills like rebuke, then like blessing. Children laugh for the first time on a harvest night. No one dies. The scarecrow does not object. New rhyme, then. New rule. The blade can name what starves us, not only who. A rotten ledger, a cruel custom, a lie sold as food. A door can be guilty. A lock can bleed. The field is not cruel. The field is exact. Years pass like geese awkward on the ground, graceful in leaving. The scarecrow still points some nights at hands, some nights at habits. Mara exacts a different tithe from those who hoard, those who hide, those who owe. She becomes a hinge the village swings on. Not loved, not safe, necessary. Children swear her shadow holds straw. Maybe it does. Maybe that's how justice looks here. A boy with red twine for courage returns. The same, now older. He asks whether the scarecrow could point at a disease or luck. Mara says, it only points at choices. Luck is weather. Choice is a door. He nods the way men nod when they plan to try, and ties his twine to the fence. The year the river rises, the scarecrow points at no one. Suspicious, Mara walks the rows till dawn. On the far edge, she finds where the bank broke, and in the mud a drift of buttons, bones, bottles, and the pastor's letter, water-gnawed yet legible. It confirms what she already breathes. The first harvest murder was a debt collected with a blade, a neighbor who purchased a winter by selling a life. She tucks the letter into the scarecrow's coat and says nothing. The crows say plenty. You want a bonfire ending. Pitchforks and pitch. This is a harvest ballad. It prefers arithmetic. The year comes when the scarecrow points at Mara again. The arm lifts, the knife appears, the finger names. The village tenses like a rope, asked to be bridge and noose, both. Mara does not run. She has already arrived. She climbs the fence, one rib at a time, and stands before the judge of straw. Up close, the burlap is a map of weather. The hat smells of rain and sermons. In the buttonhole where a flower might live, the corner of the pastor's letter sleeps. Is it me for what I did or me for what I will? She asks the field without mouth. The wind answers with chaff against her cheek. The crows with punctuation. The scarecrow by not moving in a way that is very much an answer. She takes the knife from the straw hand, warm as if it recently remembered blood. She turns to the village, which waits like a congregation unsure of its hymn. The sheriff, new, the old is a phrase the field forgot, asks nothing. The widow, different, the river keeps work, clutches a child shaped like a question. Mara breathes once, twice, and walks past them all to the mill. Inside, accounts, rope, dust, a wheel that creaks. Why? She sets the knife on the table where the debts are kept and writes in a firm hand, debt to the field, paid forward. She slices the cord she has carried for years, knots it around the blade, carries it back, and ties the knife to the scarecrow's wrist. If the acre demands a hand, let it be the one already dirty. The village holds very still. This is not how the rhyme goes. Mara changes it. Hush and hush. Hold your hollow breath. At midnight it points, at midnight it punishes, unless the named becomes the namer. The straw arm lifts without command. The tied blade turns and listens. It finds a roof with secret grain, a ledger with false sums, a doorstep that kicked, a hand that held too tightly what should have been shared. Each is opened, each is poured, each is named, punishment widened into portion, judgment into justice, blood less often. Dupper alt. Old laws, new refrain. Rumor learns to sing a different chorus. They still say Mara and the scarecrow share a shadow, but now the rumor ends with a loaf on a table it never liked. The sheriff counts fewer bodies and more sacks. The pastor after the last pastor preaches generosity as self-defense. The children carve pumpkins with smaller teeth. One last harvest to close the knife song. The boy with the red twine returns at dusk. Twine now a bracelet frayed by years. He asks what to do if the scarecrow points at him. Mara says, "Decide before midnight who you are." When the blade appears, it wavers, then turns at his father's barn. The boy breathes out the life he doesn't want, and in the one he does. He opens the door and feeds the village first. Hush and hush, hold your hollow breath. When the reapers sleep, the reaper beneath wakes. At midnight it points, at midnight it punishes, and sometimes it pardons, and sometimes it teaches, and always it counts the cost. If you pass the field on a late October night, do not wave. Do not speak your secrets into the straw. Keep your pockets light. Keep your hands clean. If it points at you, step forward. If it points at your door, open it. If it points at your hunger, feed someone else first. If it points at your past, choose tomorrow and pay. Hush and hush, hold your hollow breath. When the lanterns gutter and the pumpkins grin thin, when the bell is tired and the river lies, remember the rule the village learned. At midnight it points, at midnight it punishes, at midnight it names, and those who listen live. Blackacre, Blackmouth. The farm stands alone like a tooth in a jaw too old to chew. Flat land, long wind, no neighbors, no help. Fence lines sag. The barn leans. The silo hums when no one listens. Everything creaks. Everything watches. Everything waits. The soil takes. The soil keeps. The field is never full. They call it the Black Acre because the earth there clings to you like a wet hand. Boots sink. Hooves falter. Shovels spit black spit. Old owners left in winter and never came back. New owners stayed one season and fled with every lamp burning. Names fade on the mailbox, sun-bleached ghosts, Ruther, Hall, nobody. The danger is not seen, it is felt. Cats refuse the yard, birds arc wide, milk sours when carried across the north field. You can hear the pump wheeze underground when the house is empty. The soil takes, the soil keeps. The field is never full. The house is plain and patient, wood gone gray, windows tight as lids, a porch that bends like a tired spine. Some rooms are too warm, others too cold, and one small cupboard never smells clean. The kitchen has a crooked clock. At night, it clicks faster. At dusk, it slows. The barn breathes. The barn is a red lung. A rope hangs where no bell is. It knows your weight with intimate accuracy. Sometimes it swings when nothing moves. Sometimes it coils like a sleeping thing that dreams of tightening. The soil takes. The soil keeps. The field is never full. The new owner, call the figure the keeper, came in a thin October. They found the well half-choked with leaves, a Bible pressed flat around a dead moth, and a nail hammered sideways into the threshold, head up like an eye. The keeper walked the fences, counted posts, counted steps. They found 3 dead crows, a child's mitten in the mud, and a bone too big for a rabbit, too small for a cow. They set a hand on the barn and felt it breathe once, shallow, as if not to be noticed. Night fell as if pushed. The dark on the Black Acre is not absence of light. It is the presence of something else. It smells like iron that remembers blood, damp straw, and cold wood that wants to live again. The soil takes. The soil keeps. The field is never full. They say if you stand in the yard, you can hear breathing under the rows. They say if you place your ear to the floorboards, the pump whistles names that aren't yours. They do not come at night. They leave casseroles at the lane with a note that says, "Welcome," and another that says, "Don't go into the north field after dusk." The north field looks ordinary until the sun leaves it alone. Then the stalks are fingers, the furrows are ribs, the crows are holes that forgot to be filled. The keeper sat on the porch. They did not sleep. Sometime after midnight, something leaned on the side of the house. Just once. A weight. A test. A reminder that wood gives before bone. The soil takes. The soil keeps. The field is never full. Morning shows nothing kind. A hen under the porch, neck twisted neatly. Hoofprints leading into the pasture and not leading out. Footprints on the inside of the back door that do not match the keeper's. The silo hums louder in day. From above, the north field is a stain on a quilt-stitched blind. There in the soil, a polished red stone, a bent spoon and a ribbon tied around a knot of hair. At the far end, where the fence fails, there is a gap. Every farm has a gap. Most are for deer. This is for something else. The keeper found a print there. 2 long toes, one shorter, the heel that does not belong. It points toward wherever you stand and keeps pointing. The soil takes. The soil keeps. The field is never full. The second night brought the smell before the sound. Rot, sweet rot. Then silence. Then a drag, a scrape, a breath pulled through cloth. Boards bowed with a weight not there before. A line of flour on the floor showed a mark like a finger pointing toward the pantry. The pantry breathed out, jars trembling like teeth. Day 3 laughed at day 1. The hen's bones stacked in neat order. The hoof prints doubled back, then stopped under nothing. On the well's lip, damp as if a mouth had rested there. On the barn beam, 5 long marks higher than any ladder could reach. The soil takes, the soil keeps. The field is never full. This is not a haunting. It is a hunger that farms. It tills fear. It plants silence. It harvests when you flinch. You do not see it. You see what it leaves. The prints, the circles, the jars moved from shelf to shelf, the rope shaping its own shadow at noon. On the 7th day, the unknown stopped pretending to walk and started pretending to stand. A form made of absence, stitched with wet sheen. If you looked at it, you saw the house reflected in the well. If you looked away, you felt a hand guiding you toward somewhere unnamed. The keeper stared until their eyes watered. Blinking is a door. The soil takes, the soil keeps. The field is never full. The danger wants a bargain. Small things every day, or one large thing once. You will forget a name, break a plate, misplace a road, wake with soil under your nails and not know what you planted. Keeper kept a ledger. 1, hen. 2, hoof prints. 3, rope inches. 4, jar sounds. 5, salt bowl crack. 6, nail compass. 7, the dog's refusal. 8, waters moved. They flipped the page, left the next line blank, and opened the pantry. Inside, jars arranged themselves into a little town. One lay on its side, syrup pooling as if blood were sweet. On the wall, 4 scratches. 2 long, 1 shorter, 1 unfinished. The soil takes, the soil keeps. The field is never full. They tell it like this. The keeper went into the north field with a cord, a rusted nail, and the redstone. They tied, drove, and said, "Enough!" The field listened. The dark sighed. The porch boards rose. The rope went slack. The well water climbed 2 inches and then stood still to watch. The soil takes, the soil keeps. The field is never full. This did not end it. It taught it. The cord frayed. The nail loosened. The stone rolled. The keeper set new salt, new knots, new nails. They counted losses as prayers and did not flinch when the floorboards bowed. You want an ending that burns. This is a farm. Things rot here. Fire is a visitor. Decay is a citizen. So here is your ending. An inventory that does not finish. A hunger that does not leave. The barn breathes. The house watches.
The rope waits. The well holds faces that do not blink. Some nights nothing happens, and that is worse. The soil takes, the soil keeps. The field is never full. If you pass the black acre, do not wave. Do not whistle, do not say safe. If the barn breathes, do not tell it to stop. If the rope moves, let it. If the pantry prays, listen. If the north field opens, do not step in. Do not look in. Do not breathe in. The farm stands alone like a tooth in a jaw too old to chew. This is what the dark does with us when we are careful. This is what the dark does with us when we are not. You will not win. You will not lose. You will simply be measured. The soil takes, the soil keeps. The field is never full. Someone on the Stairs, autumn 1947. Tom Harlan had lived alone at the end of Ash Street for almost a year when he decided the house had learned his rhythms. It was the small things a place notices. The way he set his boots side by side on the mat. How he knocked ash from a match with 2 taps against the sink. The exact spot his spoon clicked when he set it down after soup. He liked the regularity. After wartime, regularity felt like a promise. If the day begins this way and ends this way, then the hours in between will behave. He worked at the rail yard, late shift most weeks. The smell of oil never quite left his hands. The radio gave him company when he came home. Baseball scores, weary music, a host who sounded like he was trying to smile without breaking it. Tom ate at the kitchen table, wrote a few lines to his sister in Ohio, rinsed a plate, and went to bed. On Fridays, he swept. On Sundays, he shaved again and took a longer walk. It was the last week of October 1947. Coal smoke drifted over town and a weak cold ran along the river. Children rehearsed for Halloween by knocking on doors at the wrong times and then laughing as they ran. At the Five and Dime, Mrs. Klein sold masks that looked like they would tear if you breathed too hard. She told Tom to leave his porch light on for the children if he was going to be home. "They're skittish of your place," she said, tapping the counter. "Edge of town and all." He told her he would. Tom's house stood where the paved road thinned to gravel. It was plain, a narrow 2-story with a bowed porch and clapboard siding that needed paint. He kept the things he needed where he could see them. The skeleton key hung on a nail by the stove. The spare bulbs lived under the sink in a paper bag. The axe leaned in the cellar corner, edge covered in a leather cap. He was not a superstitious man. He did, however, keep his doors locked and his windows latched because that was how you behaved toward weather and strangers. The first odd thing was barely worth notice. One Thursday night, the stairwell bulb burned out 2 weeks ahead of schedule. He said, "All right," to no one, took the step stool and changed it. Glass grit pricked his palm when he unscrewed the dead bulb. He wiped it on his pants and finished the job. When he climbed down, the new bulb flickered twice and stayed steady. He chalked it up to the wiring. The second odd thing was the coat. Tom kept an old wool overcoat on the newel post at the bottom of the stairs. It was the first thing he reached for in the morning and the last thing he touched at night. One Tuesday evening he came in from work and the coat faced the other way. He stood with his hand on it for longer than necessary, then turned it back. "Not funny," he said, though no one had told a joke. He asked himself later if he had turned it without thinking. He decided he probably had, and let himself believe it. A few days passed. He woke twice in the night, with the sense that someone had just walked through the upstairs hallway. He knew that feeling from barracks, waking as a body went by, a change in air that the brain learned to track. But this house had no corridor wide enough for other men, and no other men. He sat up, listened, heard the ordinary plumbing noises and a far dog, and lay back down. "Draft," he said out loud, and the word felt like a lid set on a pot. Something could still simmer, but it would not boil over. On the evening before Halloween, Tom came home earlier than usual. The foreman had dismissed the crew by dusk. A cold front sat stubborn on the horizon, and the rails sang with it. He lit the stove and set a pot on to heat. The radio offered a bright band that did not match the light. He turned it down until the trumpet was a whisper. He ate standing up, then washed the plate and leaned it in the rack. He took his mail in a stack and set it on the table. He would open it later. There would be nothing urgent. As he reached to hang his coat on the newel post, he felt resistance. The coat snagged as though another hand held the sleeve. The snag let go a fraction of a second later. He stood still with the coat in his hand. He heard nothing but his own breath and the tiny tick of cooling metal from the stove. He hung the coat and stepped back. The air on the stairs felt colder than the air in the hall. He went to the kitchen to check the back door. The bolt was set. He checked the front. The chain was snug. He checked the latches on the windows in the living room and the kitchen. He checked the cellar door. It was shut, the hook in place. He told himself it was habit, not fear. He told himself again that he did not scare easy anymore. At 9 o'clock, a group of children came up the walk, voices small and brave. Tom turned on the porch light and waited at the door. He gave them licorice and pennies. One boy, his mask pushed up, peered past Tom into the house and said, "Does your upstairs creak at night?" Tom smiled like men smile at children they do not understand, and said, "Only the way it should." The boy nodded, as if he had expected that answer. When the last costume had gone, and the porch was quiet, Tom turned off the light and shut the door. He did not lock it right away. He stood behind it, listening. The house felt attentive. He did not know what that meant, except that the space seemed to hold his movements a fraction longer than usual, as if testing their weight. He locked the door. He went to the foot of the stairs and looked up. The new bulb made a circle of decent light on the landing. Beyond it, the hallway ran into shadow. He remembered his Friday habit and wished, briefly, that it were Friday, so that sweeping could simplify the night by giving it a job. Then he climbed to the landing and stood to the side to reach the pull chain. As his fingers grazed it, the chain moved toward him. Only a fraction of an inch, enough to be nonsense. He didn't pull it. He left the light on and went to bed. He woke around 2. No dream. No noise as such. He knew what had roused him. Someone standing still in the hallway, close enough that he could tell the difference between empty air and air occupied. He lay without moving. The house settled once in a sound like a slow exhale. He told himself, "Be practical." He sat up and swung his feet to the floor. The boards were cold. He walked to the door and stood with his hand on the knob. He counted to 8 and opened it. The landing light was still on. The hallway looked the way it always did. Worn runner, wallpaper that had been floral before sun took the color out of it, bedroom doors closed. The coat on the newel post hung the right way. Everything in its place. Tom stepped into the hall and felt the temperature change on his right cheek, like a breath. He turned his head. Nothing there. He reached out with one hand and touched the air. It pushed back just slightly, the way you might brush against a person in a crowded pew. He withdrew his hand. He took a step. The second stair rung differently under his foot. He stood for a long moment, listening to the air. After a while, his body insisted on the ordinary. The need to sit. The need to lie down. The need to finish the night the way nights finish. He went back to bed and consented to sleep. The next morning was the 31st. The day moved with a practical rhythm. Coffee, shaving, the walk to the yard, the steady talk of iron. Between tasks, his mind returned to the landing. He did not tell anyone at work. He wasn't afraid of being laughed at. He was afraid of learning the wrong story by telling it to the wrong mouth. He bought 2 extra bulbs at lunch and put them in his coat pocket like talismans he didn't believe in. He left early. The foreman waved him off with a joke about candy. Tom walked home in a wind that made leaves scrape along the curb like paper getting ready to burn. He unlocked his door and stepped inside, and knew immediately that someone had been on the stairs since morning. The hat he kept on the newel post had been moved an inch forward, the brim now shading the top step. It was a simple change that only a person who lived with the hat would notice. He set it back without comment. He took the 2 new bulbs from his coat and put one on the 3rd stair and one on the kitchen table. He warmed soup, ate half, and left the rest on the stove. He put a strip of flour across the kitchen threshold and across the middle of the landing as if planning to catch a mouse doing something unwise. He sat at the table with the mail and read nothing. He turned the radio down to a murmur that might be mistaken for distance. When the first knock came, he opened the door without looking through the glass and handed out licorice again. Small figures drifted up and away. A paper ghost tugged against its string at someone's porch across the street until it unhooked and sailed toward the telephone wires. The night settled in, the way nights do. A steady pressure, a change in the reach of the lamp on the end table, a tick that didn't matter until it did. Tom cleared the strip of wrappers from the table and put the kettle on for tea he would not drink. He stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked up at the landing. The flower line lay flat and bright like verse on a page. He took 2 steps up and then stopped. There was a footfall above him, not a heavy tread, a placing deliberate. It matched his pause, as if it had expected him to stop there and was pleased that the scene had been properly rehearsed. He said steadily, "All right," as he had said to the burned bulb, and went up. When his toe reached the floor, a mark appeared in it 3 inches to the right of his foot. It wasn't a shoe. It wasn't a bare foot. It was 3 toe-shaped dents that turned slightly inward, like a child learning to stand. He watched the dents deepen and then settle. Someone knocked on the front door. Tom didn't move. The knocking went away. He watched the flower as if it were a clock. The mark did not change. After a time, he reached down and touched the flower. It was soft and ordinary under his fingertip. He wiped it away and crossed the landing and opened the bedroom door. The room was as he had left it. He closed the door and went down the stairs. At the bottom, he looked back. The flower had a new mark in it, an imprecise oval, as if a palm had leaned there and then been taken away. He slept on the couch. He did not dream. He woke before dawn and found the flower unaltered from what he remembered, which did not persuade him much. He swept it up, put the broom away, and made coffee. He looked at the hat on the newel post and left it where it was. He opened the back door and breathed October as if it were medicine. Across the street, Mrs. Klein's husband loaded their truck with crates of apples. He raised a hand. Tom almost asked him to come over, stand on the landing, and say what he felt. He didn't. It would not help to have someone else's name for the same absence. Saturday brought smaller changes. The icebox hummed a beat too slow and recovered. The kettle let off steam with a whistle he hadn't heard it make before. The coat felt colder when he put it on. At noon, he went to the cellar to bring up coal and stood with his hand on the pull string for the bulb longer than he wanted to. He pulled it, and the light came in a sickly wash and steadied. On his way back up, he thought he heard someone step aside at the top to let him pass, like 2 people meeting on a narrow stair. He didn't look up as he came through the door. He didn't want to test the feeling, and he didn't want to insult it either. In the afternoon, he walked to the grocer for bread and butter and went by the sheriff's office without looking in. Sheriff West had a way of turning questions into debts. Tom didn't need to owe anyone a story. He kept walking. He returned home with the small loaf under his arm and a sensation gathering at the base of his throat, like standing near a blast furnace, the warmth distant and alarming for being so well behaved. The days followed one another with the method that comes after harvest. Cooler mornings, earlier lamps. The guest in the house, he had begun to think of it with that word, did not rattle pots or slam doors. It preferred patience. It stood where people stand when they are waiting to be introduced. It chose thresholds and learned how long it could remain before the house would complain. The house did not complain. By the second week of November, Tom had started a notebook. He did not write anything dramatic in it. He wrote the time he heard a foot on the stairs, which board gave, whether the landing was cold, whether he woke at 2 or at 3. He wrote when the stairwell bulb flickered, and when it did not. He wrote, hat forward, coat left, kettle late, door chain swayed once, radio volume rose a notch, not my doing. Some entries were only a line drawn across the page. On those days, nothing had happened, or too much had happened for specifics. One Sunday, he scrubbed the kitchen floor on his knees the way his mother had, and the guest was quiet while he did it, as if acknowledging labor. Another evening, he came home to find the pantry jars arranged in pairs by height. He laughed in the brief, unconvincing way a man laughs when relieved and confused at once, then put the jars back. An hour later, the pairs returned. He left them in their matched order and slept without trouble that night. He began stepping over the second stair after dark. He did not think this was superstition. It felt like good manners. Leave the place on the step where something stands, and it may leave your places alone. He slept better when he gave the stair its space. He did not tell anyone this. In mid-November, Mrs. Klein stopped him outside the Five and Dime and asked if he was all right. She said he looked tired. He said he was sleeping on the couch to give the bed a rest, and heard the words as he said them, ridiculous and true. She pressed the small paper parcel into his hands and told him it was bread her sister had sent too much of. When he got home and opened it, it was not bread, but a new bulb wrapped in newspaper and a pack of matches. He put the bulb on the third stair and the matches in the kitchen bowl. He said, "Thank you," to no one, and it felt honestly meant. On a Tuesday in late November, a storm rolled in early. The street disappeared. The house took on the sound of a ship. Tom sat at the kitchen table with his notebook open and the radio low. The upstairs door to the spare room drifted an inch and stopped. He went up and shut it and set a chair against it without comment. He came back down and stood at the foot of the stairs and felt a pressure on his chest, like the moment before a cough. He put a hand to the newel post and waited for it to pass. It did. When he took his hand away, 4 faint lines showed on the wood, not scratches so much as impressions left by weight. They faded within the hour. He tried a practical experiment. He moved the key from its nail by the stove and put it in his pocket. He left it there for 3 days. During those days, the stairwell bulb did not flicker, and the coat did not turn, and the hat did not move an inch. The air on the landing remained colder than the hallway, but not by much. On the 4th day, he hung the key back on the nail. That night, the chain on the front door swayed once, barely enough to show, and a clean oval appeared in dust on the landing as if a palm had rested there while stepping off the last stair. He wrote, "Key on nail, guest pleased." The first real snow came the week after Thanksgiving. Tom shoveled the walk before dawn and listened to the quiet, the way a man listens to a friend decide what to say. He went in and took his coat off and left boots on the mat. He made coffee and leaned against the counter and said into the kitchen, "All right, we can share the stairs." He wasn't sure if he had meant to say it aloud. He felt foolish, then relieved, then steady. The arrangement held. The guest kept to the landing and the second stair after dark. It did not come into the bedroom when he was in it. It did not cross the kitchen threshold while he ate. It stood in the narrow place between rooms, and in return Tom used the rooms as rooms, and did not walk into the narrow place more than he had to. When the radio lied about the weather or the price of grain, the wall behind it gave 3 quiet taps that sounded like a cough, politely correcting a story. He tapped the table in answer and felt crazy for doing it, and calm after he had. On the last night of the year, Tom went to the Kleins for a small party with coffee and a lemon cake that tasted as if it had waited too long for summer. He came home at 11 and locked the door and set the chain and stood by the stairs to listen. The house sounded like a body at rest. He went up to bed. At midnight, the town blew 3 horns and 2 men fired a rifle, once each, in the field behind the school. In the pause after, the stairwell bulb glowed briefly without his hand on the chain and then let itself darken. He said, "Happy New Year," and laughed at himself and slept through until morning. In January, the rail yard cut hours. Tom took odd jobs, shoveling a path for the church steps, hauling crates for the grocer, fixing a loose hinge at the school. He liked the work because it was work, and because it kept him out of the house in the worst light of the day, just after noon, when winter refuses to make up its mind. At night, he read more. He wrote his sister. He got up once at 2 because he heard a foot on the stair and went to the landing and said, "I know," and went back to bed. By February, he had stopped placing flour. He had stopped moving the jars. He had stopped testing. You do not test your own shadow. The guest remained. It was not his friend, not his enemy, not his invention. It was someone who had been in the house longer than he had and would remain when he left. He knew this without resentment. Some houses come with wells. Some come with someone who stands very still on the stairs when the night is thin. Years later, because there were years, Tom kept the key on its nail and the spare bulbs under the sink. He married once, and it did not last. He retired, and it did. He came to know the sounds of winter and the noises old wood makes when it wants to remind you that it is honest. The guest did not change. When the radio finally broke and the television came in its place, the wall learned a new way to tap and did not use it much. When Tom's sister visited from Ohio, she slept downstairs. "I'm not much for stairs," she said, and he did not argue. When neighbors came by after the blizzard of '54, they stood at the foot of the stairs without realizing and raised their voices a little as if they were trying not to be rude in a library. Tom never learned the guest's name. He sometimes imagined it was the house itself, standing where it had learned to balance. He sometimes thought a soldier had come home in pieces to the wrong address and decided to be polite about it. On certain nights, he believed nothing at all, and the steps made their small complaints, and the landing kept its temper, and that was enough. He died in summer, with the windows open and the curtains lifting as if they were trying to get a better look at the street. The house took new owners that fall, a young couple with a child who liked to sit on the second stair and drop a rubber ball to watch it bounce. The couple learned the same routines without being told. Leave the key on the nail, step wide on the second stair, change the bulb on the first weekend of the month. They set a crib in the bedroom, and when the baby would not sleep, they walked the hall and sang old songs, and paused at the landing without noticing that they always paused in the same place. If you go to the end of Ash Street now, the porch is new and the paint is newer. The hat and coat are gone, and the old axe has rusted and been thrown away. On late October nights, if you stand on the sidewalk and listen very carefully, the stairwell light will turn on without a hand, and a quiet will gather on the landing that feels like a person making room for you to pass. The house has learned the rhythm of other lives, It still remembers Tom's. It keeps the key on the nail. It minds the door chain. It stands very still where the stairs make a choice and waits for polite company to go first. The story doesn't need more than that. A house, a man, a habit, someone on the stairs when no one ought to be. The rest is living with it, and living with it is what people did in 1947 and do now. Step around the second stair. Say goodnight to an empty landing. Sleep on the couch once in a while. And if the chain on the door sways once, barely enough to show, say, all right.